Hi, this is Sherry of The Delicious Story, and in this episode, I will be talking with Elena Greenberg. She is a coach, mediator, and attorney, and we'll be talking about the very difficult subject of difficult subjects and how to navigate those with family so that you can honor, understand people, and also have peace and joy with your family, especially during the holiday season. But before that, I'd like to invite you to check out Story Gift Shop, where we've curated and created items meant to inspire you to live your own life story. You'll find history stories, word stories, and just thoughts meant to provoke you to live your life well. Please check out Story Gift Shop, and let's get into this and find our way to peace and harmony with family. Elena, thank you so much for being on The Delicious Story today.
Thank you for having me.
Wonderful. Well, as we're recording this, I'm going to take off my glasses. Can't stand the glare. As we're recording this, next week is Thanksgiving, and we're into the new holiday season. This year, even though the numbers are ticking up again, unfortunately for COVID, I think more and more families have, we're figuring out this is the new normal, and people are going to gather probably more than ever before. And so I wanted to talk to you, given your expertise. Now, you're an attorney and mediator. Can you explain a little bit about what you do, your background, and what you're currently doing as a mediator?
Sure. Yeah. So I've been an attorney for about 12 years. 12 years. And I practice primarily in family law and criminal law. I've been a mediator since about 2015. And right now I work for Iowa Mediation Service, which is a statewide service. And it was established in 1985 to help with farmer creditor issues that were cropping up at that time in the 80s with the farm crisis. But Iowa Mediation Service does a variety of different types of mediation, including, now that I've joined the team, we're taking on more family law mediations. We can do neighbor-to-neighbor disputes, voluntary mediations, employers and employees, just a pretty wide variety. And we also offer trainings, basic mediation training and advanced trainings twice a year, every year, and then other talks and facilitations as needed. Also farm succession planning. So I started this year with IMS. I'm also a certified divorce financial analyst, a certified life coach. I think that's the big, and I've also certified collaborative law. So I have a few different areas.
That's a lot.
Yes.
Well, so I guess I'm going to ask the basic sort of dumb questions, but it seems to me mediation is a somewhat newer concept. How long has mediation been theoretically, we've all been trying to find the happy, peaceful medium, but how long has mediation been a thing?
Well, so that's a hard question to answer. I think mediation has been around in some form, probably since the beginning of time. Anytime when you had two people in a dispute and a neutral third party who is trying to help them or manage the conflict. In the history in the United States, the brief overview is that it appears that both general mediation and mediation specifically for family law started to crop up between the 60s and the 70s. Family law had conciliation courts as far back as I think the late 20s, but that was aimed at helping couples stay together. So kind of morphed into the mediation of helping people separate. And that it went along too with, I believe it was in the 70s when we started to have no fault divorce. Prior to that, you were basically suing your spouse for divorce, almost like a contracts case. They didn't hold up their end of the bargain. And different jurisdictions had different things that would automatically be cause for divorce. But now we have the model of it's not about fault, it's about ending that relationship. So that, I think, helped mediation come in and say, how can we do that? How can we help people have self-determination and also declog the courts? which is a more practical reason. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And that makes sense, right? It makes sense. Declog the courts because they're already overbooked anyway.
Right.
Okay. So I'm just going to put you on the spot right now.
Sure.
In your personal experience, because this is going to get to the heart of what we're going to talk about today, which is, how to have a peaceful relationship with your family, but we'll talk about that. Given the polarization of certain topics, politics, in the primary one, how can we come together? But first, I want you to throw me a hope bone here. In your anecdotal experience, how many times have you seen mediation on a scale actually get people to realize that they have more that they want to do to get along, as opposed to just staying on their opposites?
I think that the magic of mediation is showing people, showing people who are in some sort of conflict, what the other person is really feeling and thinking, and sometimes also revealing to themselves what they're really feeling and thinking. And I can equate that with the life coaching, which when I went through my certification program, I thought this is really mediation, but for one person. And a lot of times in life coaching, the magic of that is just, you might say something to me and I reflect it back to you, distilling the parts that I hear are important and sort of getting rid of the extraneous bits. And then I've so often seen the light bulb come on and they say, I never thought of it that way, even though they are the ones who said it to me. And that happens so much in mediation, that when you sit down and you have this third person neutral who can, first of all, set the space and have a safe space, where the people are going to get a turn to talk. There won't, hopefully, and there hasn't been ever in my experience, violence or, that kind of a thing. And people are able to not just talk, but have what they're saying reflected back to them. And also, as mediators, we also try to find out what's behind their position, where they're coming from. And so that takes that's a lot of practice of listening very closely, picking up on words that are being repeated often that they might not be aware of, and that type of thing. And I think what that does is reflect back to them what they're saying, but also to the other party. And I could go on forever about that, but basically, I think that's the magic sort of mediation. It's not magic, it's practice skilled, but that's, I think to the participants, sometimes it can feel like a whole new understanding has opened up.
Right. It sounds to me a lot then, to abbreviate that, like all of a sudden people are being more empathetic. They're seeing it from another point of view, and they're recognizing common feelings.
Right.
And a perspective that they may not agree with, but at least they understand it and where it's coming from.
Right.
Which sounds like a great segue for talking about politics. Now, we are not going to get into our personal politics here, because really this isn't the point of this conversation. But let's face it, families are a unique microcosm. They're our place where we go and we figure out how to deal with the rest of the world. And I don't know about you, but as I look out at the rest of the world, our country and beyond, I'm always, so frustrated by the fact that we don't manage to get along. And yet we're all part of the same human family, right? And then I think, well, wait a minute, why do I expect humanity to do this when our own families seem to be failing at getting along, and primarily getting along on things like the subject of politics? Now, used to be that you didn't talk about politics and you didn't talk about religion, right? And we all politely talked about the potatoes and how good the chicken was, and we didn't have depth conversations. We just didn't do it. So that said, maybe let's start with what is going on from your perspective. What is going on when people come into any conversation, but particularly to a family function like Thanksgiving coming up, and they come, what's the word? They come packed for bear. I don't know. I think I've heard they come ready to be conflicting. Okay.
Right.
So what's going on there? Why are we this way?
Well, I think sometimes our identity and our opinions are so intertwined that we are, when someone is confronting us with something that does not fit with our view of who we are, then we have a couple of choices. Either we have to keep that opinion and change who we are, which doesn't often happen, or we change the information to comport with who we see ourselves as. And that's why I think sometimes it can feel like you're talking to someone about a thing, even let's say you both saw the same article or you both saw the same video, and it seems like you have watched something completely different. Each party is looking at it under the lens of their particular identity, their feelings, their thoughts. One thing to equate that with, which I always keep in mind, is I think this was way back in my undergrad as an English psychology major, and I don't know if it came in English or in psychology, but the idea that even when a person reads a book, they're not having the same experience than the next person who's reading a book. And if they read that book in their 20s and then they pick it up again in their 40s, they're not reading the same book. The words are all the same, but there's the lens of their life experiences, their opinions, everything. And I think that's happening today, where it seems like, one side on a conflict is saying that it's clearly this, or it's clearly that. The other person is seeing it in the completely opposite way. And I think, another thing, and hopefully this will help with family gatherings, is take a moment to think about, if you're going to communicate with, let's say your brother, what is the purpose of your communication? Are you trying to convince him that you're right? Are you arguing, or are you having a conversation? And those are completely different things. And if you're going to have a conversation, then you should approach it with curiosity. And in that case, you want to hear what they have to say. Why are they interpreting it, or how are they interpreting it? Instead of having the goal be, I want to change your opinion and therefore change possibly who you are as a person. And that's not going to be easily done, especially not over Thanksgiving dinner.
Right. And I think maybe and that's the first tool. I'll probably create a little dot list when I write a post about this. But the first rule is to really ask yourself, what's the purpose of what I'm doing here?
Mm-hmm.
What's the purpose? What is my goal by saying this or bringing this up right now? Is it to, express something and get other people's input, or is it just to express my own opinion? And what does that say about me? That's really my goal here on slurping down gravy and mashed potatoes.
Right. And it can change how you approach it then.
Right. You can say, I'm really just being belligerent, or I'm really just being, I don't think we'd say that to ourselves, but we might say, if you ask yourself, what is it I hope to achieve? Mm-hmm. If you can play it out a little bit broader and say, well, I know that they're not going to like what I'm going to say. It's going to create conflict. We're going to be unhappy sitting around the table,
right,
kind of thing. So that said, what do people do? So the golden rule, right? And I talk about politics. Well, how can we have both not talk about something, but recognize that we disagree and leave it at that? Is that possible?
It is. And how I would relate that to mediation is sometimes we reach impasse and we're not going to have an agreement at the end of the day, but sometimes we can balance things out a little bit. We can understand what the other person is saying. We can understand our position better. So it doesn't seem like it's just there's a wall between us anymore, and I think, and I hope that through the last few years, some of us have had to do that by necessity, because we don't want to lose our family and our friends. So we have to have some equilibrium put back in. And, one technique we use often in mediation is just reflecting what that person has said. And I think it does two things. First of all, it makes the other person feel heard. And I think that's a really important human thing, is that we all want to be heard correctly to our, specifications. And another thing, I think the person who is reflecting is then taking a moment to think about, what did I hear and what did that mean to me? How would I put it in my words? Because so often we're just waiting for our turn to talk. And so we might entirely miss what that person said. So in the act of reflecting, I think we're doing a service to both parties.
Okay. All right. So we're going to have that conversation. Let's really listen and reflect back what we think they're saying so they can confirm it. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But then so let's just put a scenario around the table. You got somebody, they got a bone to pick and they're going to pick it up at dinner. Can you, is it okay to set some boundaries and say, we know we think differently. We know we don't agree, but we're not going to bring that to this table. I mean, how do you set boundaries with families so that you can remain civil?
You can absolutely set boundaries. And that's another benefit of mediation is often the mediator sets those boundaries, how we're going to talk, what we're going to do. So you can absolutely do that. I think the problem comes is, like I am hosting Thanksgiving this year. So if all the family who are coming, I say, nobody's going to talk about politics. I mean, that's so tempting, right? Especially to someone who has a bone to pick. They're going to use any excuse they can to just go for it. So I sometimes think that just saying, we're going to compartmentalize. If we want to talk about those things, we're going to do it after dinner, or we're going to do it before dinner. And once the food is served, we're done talking about that, So I think you can set boundaries and guide rules or guideposts, but also keep in mind who your audience is if you have someone who can become belligerent and is looking for a fight anyway, I don't think they're going to really worry about your rule. But if you say, okay, we will address that, we're not silencing anyone. I've heard this issue with silencing people, and I don't think we want to do that. But we want to say our objective for this dinner is to be together, to be thankful, to enjoy the food. And then, after or before, if this is something you want to talk about, I will give you the space to be heard.
Okay. All right. All right. And so with that said, then, and this goes beyond the meal, but and this is kind of how you and I met and started talking about this, but what do you do when you have a family member who, is there anything you can do if you have a family member who is in a space where they are just putting their opinions ahead of the relationship? I mean, what can you do? I mean, because family estrangement, is a terrible thing, but it's a lot more common. And any suggestions or guidance for what to do in those situations?
Yeah, that's a tough one. And that has impacted my life as well. And I don't think I have the ready answer for that. I mean, one thing, and not to keep plugging mediation, but any parties that have found themselves in a conflict can seek a mediator and can use that service. But if that's not possible because one side or the other is not willing to do it, I think boundary setting. I think if this person is sending you information or saying something to you that's really getting under your skin, you might say, I love you. We're family. I want to be able to talk to you and send you pictures of my kids and do all of that. But I think we just don't see eye to eye. And I would appreciate if we could just you stick to the things that we enjoy to do together. I think that's the last step, because if you can along the way listen to them and have them listen to you in a respectful way, where you're not trying to tell them how they're wrong, you're not trying to change their opinion, and again, then the core of who they are, then that's the best way. But like you said, there are going to be times when you reach impasse, and maybe that's the time to put down that conversation.
Yeah. I was just reading a book called Fractured Families the other day, and when estranged family members come together, the writer, I forget the name of the author, was saying that the both parties agree that they're going to disagree on the past, that they're not going to seek an apology, and they're just going to move forward. They're just going to move forward.
Right.
And I think in this space right now, especially, we just need to recognize that we share common feelings, but that we're not going to agree anytime soon. And so we've got to ask ourselves, what's the goal here? What's the point? What's the point of what we're doing?
Right.
Yeah.
And it's interesting you use the word agree, that we're not going to agree. And that's something we say a lot. But what does that mean, really? I think sometimes it means I'm not going to convince you of my opinion, and you're not going to convince me of my opinion. So it's not even so much agree, but we're just not going to be able to get you to see it from my perspective. And really, it's interesting that we ever have that goal, because you really can't ever see it completely from my perspective. Like, you can't ever read the same book as me. Yeah.
Right. And in fact, I think the space we're at, and I was thinking a lot about this before we talked, was, we're talking over each other, and we're trying to, obviously we attach our opinions to our identity, right? And so if you tell somebody their opinions are wrong, and they just have to change them, then naturally they're going to push back, right? It's making all the sense in the world. Where I feel like we're missing dialogue, and maybe you can help me as a mediator, help us see this. The facts are irrelevant. The feelings that we're ginning up are very much the same. We all are afraid. We all have no control over most of it. And we're all going to be gone in the end. And so, I mean, we're terminal. We came in and we're going out. And so, how we're spending this time is the only thing we can control. And so, as a mediator, is that a factor where you can get people to agree that they don't agree on facts, but they basically want the same thing? They want to feel secure. They want to feel like, they're going to be we want to be taken care of. We want things to go okay,
Yeah, I think you can. I mean, I think, depending on the type of mediation and where we are trying to seek agreement, or at least a way forward, that absolutely can be part of it, to say, we're going to just, recognize that your view of the situation, even with the words facts, your view of the facts is not going to be the same as my view of the facts. And how are we going to move forward with that?
Do you think, as a mediator, you talked early on about this tipping point where, the light bulb comes on, and people who've been saying the thing for a while, all of a sudden they say it and they understand it with newfound thing. Are the steps of mediation, you think, what makes that possible? I mean, ultimately, where people are listening enough that they finally get it in their head. Oh, this is what's.
Yeah, I mean, it's partially that process, because we will start with each person presenting, what's going on from their perspective, or anything they want to tell us about what is happening. And then, we spend a lot of time, and this is the same with life coaching, just trying to get further into that. And what really helps is having intense curiosity. So instead of thinking, when you say the sky is very blue today, and I'm thinking, maybe even as a mediator or a life coach, I'm neutral, but it's very easy for the thought to come in, I think it's gray, but as a mediator, I want to think, okay, why do you think it's blue? So instead of like, are you right? Are you wrong? Tell me a little bit more about the sky and what it looks like to you. I don't know if that's the greatest example, but, trying to have that curiosity instead of imposing the color I'm seeing and how I'm feeling about it, which I think is a very human automatic response to say, I've been given information. What do I think about it? And as a neutral, as a mediator, that's really irrelevant. So what my job is to find out more about that. And I think when we do that, the person who's telling us is also discovering where that's coming from. And there's oftentimes, even I will hear myself say something and then go, whoa, I didn't even know I felt that way. But with the mediator or any sort of neutral, they can reflect that back at you. And then you can hear it from someone else's mouth. Yeah.
Okay. And to me, this seems like the biggest hurdle in the world, right? Because if I have an opinion, I've heard whatever I've heard, and I know what I know, and I've seen and I've heard it, and and so if somebody drops some other sort of fact that I think is totally baloney. So let's meditate on this for a moment. Maybe you've set boundaries, right? You said, we're not going to talk about this at dinner. At dinner, we're going to talk about other things. We understand we have different opinions, but we're going to make time for that at other points. Okay. We're going to eat now. If you really want to try and become a curious person, and you just need to take a baby step to do it, instead of finding yourself in this cycle of, I'm going to tell you what I think, I'm not listening to you, I'm going to try and convince you, even though I know you can't be convinced and I can't be convinced, give me a little taste. How can I think differently in these interactions where I can feel, help me.
Sure. I mean, just that setup that you gave me, the first question that came to mind on my mediator's hat is, let's just say, John, we agreed we would talk about this after dinner. So I'm just curious what makes you feel like compelled that we talk about it now. Let's just start there. Like, why? And so instead of like you said, and we're not going to do this, and you need to leave the table, or however that goes. I mean, let's start with why, because he might even say, oh, I forgot, I'll save it. And that saves that whole unpleasant interaction right there, because I think we tend to assume, oh, you're doing it on purpose. You're trying to upset everybody. Yeah.
We're telling ourselves a story, right? That's what we've heard before. So maybe step one in that interactive process is to ask the question, what is it you're trying to accomplish here? Is that fair, or does that sound too confrontational?
That is a little bit. I think as a mediator, I would probably say just a little bit.
Just a
but
little.
I might say, that is hard, because what are you trying to accomplish here does sound confrontational, but you have an open-ended question. So that is the first step, is to make that open-ended instead of like,
okay. I got it.
Okay.
Okay. How about John? What is it you're trying to do by talking about that now at dinner?
Yeah, that's better. I would even maybe say, we were agreed we do this after dinner. Do you feel like we're not going to do that? Or I don't know. But yeah, I mean, what you said too was better. What you want to stay away from for sure is saying you're ruining Thanksgiving. That would definitely
right. I mean, starting out by attacking. So my takeaway today, because I need a simple, small little thing I can do, right? And I need to ask, so when I open my mouth to push buttons, I need to be asking myself first, what is it I'm really trying to do here?
Right.
And
right.
I have to ask myself, what's my goal? What is it I want to accomplish by bringing this up now? How do I see this playing out? Now that's what I'm having a conversation with myself about, because I'm not going to change his opinion, right? So what am I doing it for? But in that interaction at the family table, you can say, I'm trying not to be confrontational. You can ask, so bringing this up now, what is it you hope to achieve maybe by bringing this up now?
You can even step back a little and what I would call redirect and say, Uncle John, that's very interesting. I look forward to listening to your opinion after dinner.
Okay.
So you can try then, because again, if he's, if he just forgot, you can't wait to pull that out, then that might be all you need.
Right.
Or he might just say to you, yeah. So, I mean, it's also, I think the reason it's hard too for me to just come up with a pat phrase or just a phrase that you could use is it really is so situational and what you're feeling at the time.
Right. Right. And I'm trying to, I guess what I wanted you to do for me, Elena, is I wanted you to find me a way to separate my rage, right? Which is a really comfortable place to sit.
It
I can
is.
feel self-focus and rage
Right.
from what it is I'm trying to do with these people I'm with and who
Right.
I want to be, who I
Yeah.
actually want to be, instead of that shriveled up, piece of
Right.
flesh in the corner of the room, getting
For
all
sure.
angry and resentful. I want to be something else. So
I
let's
think,
yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
oh, I was going to say, I would say my biggest advice to you on that is curiosity. And it works in all
Curious.
areas of your life, is how can I
All
go
areas of it.
right? How can I be interested in what's happening here from a little bit farther view? Zoom out a little and think, if I were watching a TV show, what would I want to know about this character right now? And I constantly remind myself, not just in mediation, but my everyday life, like, okay, why is my son not listening to me right now when I'm telling him he needs to put his shoes on? And I definitely am not a master at this, but when I find my blood starting to boil, that's where I try to go, okay. And you can be curious about yourself too. You can say, why am I having this, sometimes even physical reaction to this person and what they're saying,
Yeah. Good. That's a good way. Because it's almost looking at your life as a movie. And you take this director's perspective and you step back and you do this.
Right. What are the characters feeling in this moment? What's their motivation?
What is John's motivation? No,
right.
but that you gotta be careful with that too, because I think, well, John's just being a jerk.
Right.
Yeah,
don't answer yourself.
Don't answer. Just ask yourself, what's going on? Right. Okay, so let's wrap it up here before I get to my final question, because I do have a final question to ask every guest. But let's throw out these little tokens of these little nuggets. So at the top of it, you're saying it's okay to set boundaries.
It is.
And say, to say, but not to say we can't talk about it, but to say let's curb it for dinner so I can enjoy my potatoes and gravy. Mm-hmm. What's the next one you would say? So that's number one.
Know what you're trying to accomplish, I would say, is number two. And no, addendum to that is to know that if your motivation is that you're going to go in and change someone's opinion, it's not going to happen over Thanksgiving dinner. It just isn't. You're not going to say the most right. Well, because I think we somewhere in the back of our minds, we're going to say this one thing and their eyes are going to be wide open and they're go, oh, I've been a fool this whole time. And I've never seen that happen
ever
in 44 years. So that would be,
yeah.
Right. And then I would say curiosity, lead with curiosity. If you're sitting at Thanksgiving with somebody, you either have a familiar bond or a love or a friendship or there's some reason they're at your table. Use that as a lens to guide what you choose to do. I think that will help us all.
Yeah, that's a good one. And I'd say, an addendum to that is I'd say, be curious about yourself and what's driving you too.
Right.
Because I do think I've said, I came up with this meme once. I think self-righteousness is like this comfy chair, and I get myself situated.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's hard to get up again,
Right.
So anyway, okay. Well, thank you for those. Thank you for all that wisdom as we head into.
That was fun.
But I ask every guest to share a memorable meal story. In fact, that was really the whole reason I started the podcast. I just wanted to hear people talk about food. So, so I'm going to ask you what your favorite memorable meal is. What was served, who was there, and why do you think you remember it?
Okay, this one might be a little bit different. So I grew up with a single mom, and this was the year I was about 12, maybe 13. We didn't have a lot of finances, and my mom was working because, she would get time and a half if she worked. So I was by myself most of the day, and we weren't planning on having any kind of meal. We thought we might do it a different day, but that didn't sit well with me for one reason or another. So I went to the store and I bought, one of those tins of ham, ham-shaped ham, in like this small of a package. And I did not know anything about cooking. So I brought it home. And so all I remembered about that is that I had the ham and I cooked it in some way, and I maybe had some green beans, just plain green beans. But when my mom got home, we had this meal, and she didn't plan to have one or anything. And so that I remember that. But what's very interesting is I saw my mother yesterday, and I told her, that I was coming on your show, and I knew I would be asked something about food because that's the name of your podcast. And I told her, do you remember this, Mom? Do you remember this story? And she said, yes, I remember that you scored the top of the ham and put cloves in it and then pineapple on top. And I had not remembered that at all. And she said, and it meant so much to me because I didn't think you ever paid attention to how I made food.
Oh.
So it was really cool that we got to have that conversation because of your podcast. And it just goes to show too, this can tie back to our whole conversation, is that what's important to someone, and rightfully so that was important to my mom, I completely had forgotten it. And I was the one who did it. So that story meant something different to me than it meant to her. And neither of us were right or wrong. And it was still a lovely memory. But at the same time, you just don't know what sticks out to people. So that's my story of the can. I don't even remember, and I'm vegetarian now, so I couldn't even tell you if I don't know if I put it in the microwave or cooked. I don't know if I knew how to cook anything really then. So I don't know if it was edible.
Oh, what a great memory though, because so much of the time these meal stories I find have very little to do with food and everything to do with relationships, right? So thank you for sharing that story. And thank you for sharing, some of your thoughts and expertise as we struggle to find peace in our personal families and in our bigger country family and in our human family, if we can ever do it. But thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Take care.
Thanks.
And there you have it, another episode of The Delicious Story. Please join us again when we interview another interesting person sharing a memorable meal.